Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Dr. Christina Horvath from the University of Bath. So I'm a leader in French politics, and I had this project from the British Academy and Leverhulme Trust between 2021 and 2023 called Botanical Encounters. So botanics and plants were used in this project as a sort of pretext to look back at this entangled heritage that Bath has and try to decolonize, but in a kind of more oblique way, opening up conversations using plants and green spaces and asking many questions about who has access to gardens. I think that was an important question after COVID, where some of us had gardens and green spaces and others didn't, and that made a huge difference. But I think also this highlighted how important green spaces are, and we also know that climate change is happening, and gardens are really key also to create shade and trees and green gardens are really important for our well-being. So I also somehow discovered through this project that gardens are actually also heritage spaces. So I did some of the research on this project in Bath in Jamaica, which is a city that has a similarly, like it has a botanical garden and it has a spa source, like a source of a mineral source, a bit similar to the city of Bath in Somerset. It is interesting to see the entanglement of all the plants that traveled across the Atlantic, and also who came, like mango came from Asia to the Caribbean, and many plants like the catalpa tree came from Asia to Britain, and we have like lots of these plants growing in our gardens here. So this was just like a way of opening conversations about what these entanglements mean for our lives and how we deal with these colonial legacies in a city where if you walk into Bath Abbey, for example, you see many different tombstones and memorials for colonial officers and people who were born in Barbados or Jamaica or Antigua, but also in the East Indies. So many interconnected histories. I had a project which we did during COVID. So that was designed by students from the University of Bath. We have these VIP projects, which are the vertically integrated projects. So we included these students from various, like from first year undergraduate until PhD student, anybody can join. And these students worked on designing a route that you can walk to discover some of these interconnected histories. And actually we were quite surprised when we walked with how many connections with Barbados, how many connections with Jamaica, some with Antigua and some with other places. And some of these histories are incredibly complex. So this is something also, there are some more maps you can take. This map in particular, so there was a first version designed by students and illustrated by them, but it was redesigned by, in collaboration with Natasha Sweeting, who is the artist who also created these little postcard images. So we have a few more left of these, you can take these. And so some of the artists who contributed to this exhibition and the kind of 20 events that we run in the 2 years of the project are here today. So let me introduce you Dr. Richard White, who also lectured for a long time at Bath University and who is well known in the town as one of the first person to walk and asking questions about the colonial past. We also have Simba Pide, who is a Barbadian artist who lives in Bath and who created some of the artworks in the room, in the next room against the wall. And we also have here Felicity Bowers, who did these two pieces and who will be happy to talk about these. And we also have Ben Van Praag, who is a graffiti artist, graffiti writer. Mostly he created some spray painted pieces with ink and he's on his way and should be here after 3 o'clock, which is in 15 minutes. So I think that I would like to hand it over now to whoever wants to take over from me to talk a bit about their work.
Just go around the room.
Yeah.
That sounds like to me, yeah. Well, first of all, especially with colleagues from Soberton in the room, I wouldn't want to hold the, whatever, for being the first person to have walked and asked questions about where the money came from in Bath. And there's been a number of artists who've done that, so we're all standing on the shoulders of giants and all that kind of stuff. So everything you see here, it's kind of a tip of an iceberg of all sorts of stuff that's been going on for quite some time now, both in our individual practices, but also in this kind of collective piece that Christina's put together. My contribution to the exhibition, I even hear it at the moment because it's since been turned off. But my contribution is the sound that is playing out of this wonderful horn that Paul made. So to say a bit about the sound, I was doing a series of walks. So I did a series of walks which was all about sensing legacies of slave ownership in Bath, and walked up and down the river in the city, and then kind of largely through the lockdowns, I was doing some walks, or tried to do some walks in Sydney Gardens, where I was trying to explore some of the kind of the stories and the sounds that you don't hear, the stories that have yet to be heard or being heard, about what Sydney Gardens is about. So Sydney Gardens is full of trees that most of them, if not all of them, aren't there by accident. Somebody put them there. They tell a story. The trees tell a story. So trying to get inside some of those stories of those trees, how they happen to be, in that particular place, how some of the built environment has to be in the place, and none of it, as you might expect, is what it seems, and there are always other stories, even the stories of the place. So you didn't know that Sydney Gardens is connected to Sydney, Australia. Indeed it is, and the captain of the ship, who was the first governor of New South Wales, who was doing bid by Lord Sydney to go to Botany Bay. Somewhere in the soundtrack you will hear lovely songs from Martin Carthy going to Botany Bay, and how Botany Bay became Botany Bay. It already had a name. The people had been living there for a really long time before Captain Cook showed up. So Guy Phillips is memorialised in the Abbey over there. So all kinds of weird connections and threads that I was trying to explore whilst walking, and kind of provoking some questions, inviting people to ask questions. So what you'll hear when the sound goes back on, there is a piece that I've constructed. It's about a 15-minute piece that I've constructed, which is a bit of field recording in Sydney Gardens, to which I've added some field recordings that I made not in Sydney but in Adelaide, in the Botanical Gardens in Adelaide, a very particular place near where there is a building where Aboriginal people's bodies were cut up and their bones taken out and their bones shipped back to England. Really kind of nasty, sort of raw end of the violence of empire and colonisation. And the rest of it, there's about 4 or 5 tracks of pre-recorded music that's not mine at all. I'm just trading on their creativity, which provided a soundtrack, which some of you did, the silent disco thing that I hosted, which I used as a space in which to ask questions and think about where we were going, and what about that tree, and what about that building. Next.
Hot seat.
Yes.
Okay, yes, I'm my art practice practice involves quite a bit of printmaking, which this is a large print, and as an artist, you have kind of particular obsessions and preoccupations that just keep coming back, that don't go away, and I just always find myself just drawn to leaves in particular, any sorts of natural objects. And, I mean, I really have kind of a variety of sort of basic human collecting impulse, really, I suppose you'd call it. And I can't come back from a walk anywhere without having a pocket full of leaves and pine cones and feathers and such like. And a lot of those come into my artwork. This particular piece has sort of came out of another obsession that I've got of just the kind of the things that were being explored, sort of knowledge that was being explored in the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, just about how things worked, and that sort of search for knowledge expanded into looking for new worlds. You know, as we know, the Americas were discovered and so on, and all the sort of the rarities and the curiosities that produced, just inevitably, as all these things do, ended up in the whole history of the greed and exploitation that we know only too well now. So although I did this piece quite some time ago, before I'd kind of come into contact with this, I just felt that there were things about it that were relevant. What is one thing that is quite interesting is that this paper artist paper is quite often made of cotton. This is 100% cotton paper, and in the process of printing, the watermark that's on it says cotton has been highlighted, so that's just quite a nice little coincidence. I'll move on to my other. This piece has been done purely for this exhibition, and it leads on from Richard's work in the Botanic Gardens. This is the leaf of a catalpa tree, which is one of the species that was collected by the famous plant collectors in the sort of 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. The species also grows in China, and this particular one is actually a Chinese catalpa. But what I discovered in looking into it is that the name catalpa is its original name, or the name that it was given by the First Nations people who lived in what became Virginia. In the Muskogee language, catalpa means winged head, which I found quite fascinating, because this tree is located right in front of the replica of Minerva's temple from the Roman baths here, which has the famous winged head. So I've just found that quite a nice little kind of poetic synchronicity, as it were. This is the actual leaf that I've collaged down, put lots of glue on to stick it to the paper, and put layers of paint and texture onto. Again, it's on cotton paper as well. So there's not so much of a printmaking element in this, but it has continued my leaf obsession and my collecting obsession. So it was just really interesting to be involved in this project. I just heard about it from some friends, and slowly, it's kind of gathered momentum and has, produced quite a bit of inspiration for me, and it's been very useful in just meeting some new people. Great to make contact with Christina, and yes, long may it continue. So thank you very much.
That's a good question,
Yes,
because
please
I was,
do.
I was invigilating a few times, and I have lived with this piece for several days now, and I really wonder, when you go to the Royal Crescent, or no, that's the circus, where you have all these symbols of maybe, I don't know, it looks like alchemist symbols or masonry symbols. Have you used those, or have you?
Not specifically in here, no. But I know what you mean. I mean there's a lot of
Like when you look at
speculation.
here, like the crown and the
Yes.
star and the key, like these elements here, they really
Yes.
look like some of the alchemy symbols. And I looked through your other work there in the folder, the various colors, and it seems that even more such symbols turned up. So that was not at all a reference that you had on your mind?
Well, the alchemical element was definitely something that I was interested in. I mean, this is a series of 4 pieces, which are the 4 elements. So there are symbols in here that are related to the earth element, more specifically than air, fire, water, and so on. I mean, I also like the fact there is an element of mystery that you don't quite know what some of these symbols refer to, like the hand there. It's very difficult to say specifically, what each symbol is related to in any one system, whether it might be alchemy or masonry or whatever. They sort of more symbolise just the idea of symbols, as it were,
Yes.
of encapsulating knowledge in some emblem.
Okay. So maybe we could move into the next room but we are still here, and if you want to ask questions to Felicity, you can also after, and maybe we can move on and we can look at Simba's work, which is in the next room, so please just follow us. And she is going to come as well. Yeah, also we have some drinks here. So we have wine, beer, prosecco, cake, nibbles. Feel free to help yourself. We don't want to keep anything of this, obviously. It's like the last day anyway. Yeah, so Simba's work is on this wall, but Simba's work is a bit everywhere as well, because these are images from 2 workshops that Simba conducted. These were done here at the 4480 gallery in the basement. There is an art space and like a workshop space, and these were done in a plantation, former plantation called Balls. In Barbados, which is now the headquarters of the Horticultural Society of Barbados, which has a flower show every January. Yeah. They are also normally coming to the Chelsea flower show, and they win it quite often. Yeah. So there is this botanical tradition in Barbados where Simba comes from.
Yes, so this is my work, and when I first met Christina, coincidentally, I was working along a similar line of research, which was I guess, the history of plants and how they moved from one place to another. And this is some of the work I've been working on in relation to that. My interest lies in quite a lot in the fact that plants are all around us, and unless you take particular care to think about where they're from, generally they're just observed aesthetically or appreciated for the peaceful environment that they bring. But I don't feel as though many people question much further than that about whether or not this plant, like a ginkgo tree, how did it come to be here, where did it come from, what was the story that brought it all the way to these lands. And that's quite a lot for pretty much most plants and things that we eat. And so my research was going into that direction. I am from Barbados, and I think the history of Barbados is deeply tied with England. And during the colonial period, it made a big... If you're in Barbados, so lots of buildings are colonial structures still. And my line of work here was exploring the connections between the palm trees, which you can see quite often in Barbados. Some of them are native, quite a lot of them are not native, and the connection between them and the people, because I guess when it comes to the colonial period, most people are aware of the movement of humans, but not as much the movement of plants and how they're linked. And this piece of work here is actually looking at the medicinal plants from the Caribbean region. Not all of them. This one here is called the African tulip. These are medicinal plants. This is called the African tulip, and these are called Christmas candle. And this is quinine, which was used to create a cure for malaria, or treatment for malaria.
Which actually allowed the colonization of the inside of Africa, because once they obtained this, and that was a lot of spying and extracting knowledge to obtain this, and that allowed then the colonizers to go inside the continent.
So the exploitation of these plants led to, I guess, the exploitation of people and resources. But it was the connection between, like, I guess, as well, where plants were collected for their aesthetic qualities, as well as their medicinal qualities or their financial exploitable qualities. That I think is a really interesting connection between the lives of people. And so these are my work, and I have not. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask.
Yes, I would like to ask something about that woman's body with the green behind, which is like almost like a human tree.
Yeah.
Is there anything you would like to comment on?
She's a dancer, actually. So it was more of like a connection between, the possibilities that could be brought with the environment and human connections. I mean, humans are part of the environment, but I feel like we separate ourselves quite often. So it's open to interpretation. Yeah.
You've used quite a lot of text in the work. So
Yeah.
Can you say something about that?
Okay. Well, actually, lots of my work does involve text. Quite often, a lot of the text was from fairy tales, and the reason why I use text from fairy tales is because it's a common thread throughout different cultures, but usually the fairy tales that most people know are the ones that were brought from Europe, and those are the ones that we were raised on. So I have used those texts as the body of quite a lot of work, and I believe these ones are from there as well. But they are in reverse and backwards, so they're not to be read. So they're to be observed aesthetically.
But then you used in some of the collages quite obsessively the treasure islands.
Yes, that's true. I did use treasure islands as well. Some of the text is the treasure island one's relevant. It is about the Caribbean, and it is about basically a man that's traveling to set up a plantation and bring in slaves, and his story sold as an adventure, but it's actually quite a horrific story that has to do with the life of others that are not considered equally valuable.
Yes, so thank you. And I think we could maybe move back to the other room. So we still have Ben's images here, who is on his way. And we could maybe continue with Lucia's work. So again, like with Simba, Lucia's work is also in some of the banners that are in the corridor, because she did some of the art workshops for the project.
That wasn't very good, right?
Yes, and so Lucia has this benediction or curse in life that she is a botanist's daughter, and so that connects her with plants in maybe unwanted ways, because her dad was a lot away collecting plants where she would have liked it.
He was away a lot of my life, actually, in Brazil. Yes. Yeah, my dad's was and still is connected with Kew Gardens, but now he lives in Brazil. So, and that's how I came to meet Christina, really, was my work. I was working in Sydney Gardens on a project, the heritage funding that was there to regenerate the pleasure gardens that it was. Not how it was, but there was lots of money. And so I was there for engaging community. I also work at the Holborn Museum within the Learning Department there, doing educational work there. But I am essentially an artist, so that's what I love to do. And so, yeah, it was just a really great meeting to realise that there was this exciting project here when I was already in my own practice, studying about plants and the connectivity with people and etc. So for this project here, I've run some workshops, I've done a talk, and then to be invited to then have a sort of celebratory, getting it all coming all together at the end, just felt really great, and an opportunity to show our work also. And I happened to be working on this piece last year. I was doing a residency in Shepton Mallet, and I was sort of playing lots of things. I had a really big space, it's an old shop, and it's like hugely great because I love working in large pieces. And I've been working quite a lot interviewing my neighbour who's 90, and he was born in the Mendips in this rural village and lived there all his life. I feel like I've already told a few people this story about this piece of work. And I'm actually using him on a sound project I'm doing as well, because his stories are so brilliant, but also quite horrendous equally. He's very calm, he's very positive. His outlook is very positive, it's very happy-go-lucky, and he works a lot with the land. These are potato flowers. This is his crop of potatoes, so he just cut the potato flowers ready to dig up the potatoes. He was going to leave it for a few hours and then dig up some of the potatoes, which have kept him going for ages. They've been in his fridge. And you can see his hands, how hard they've worked on the land. It's quite amazing. And yet at the age of 18, he was sent off to Malaysia, known as Malaya then, with the battalion, the Mendip battalion. I don't know the absolute historical details, so I'm afraid I'm not a great historian, but to, in theory, defend the rubber plantations there. So his stories are very much about rural Somerset and his life growing up there, walking across the fields to dances and other sort of exciting stories, but they're also very interlaced with his stories of his time in Malaya and in the jungle, and lying in the undergrowth waiting to shoot people, which is pretty hideous. And it's there are many worse stories intertwined, and it's just never left him. And I wanted to create a piece of work to sort of honour him. And although, he told me quite a lot about the rubber tapping and the cutting of the trees, and this is a Malaysian style cut down here, and there was another sort, this is just taken aspects of it. There's another one from Brazil, it's more sort of round the tree, I note. And so I wanted to get that feeling of the cuts, these deep cuts that happen in the tree. And then of course they seal over, and the women, he said, would come in the morning with these little hooks and reopen the wounds, as it were, so the rubber would pour out, and it's a sort of liquid, sticky liquid. I don't know if anyone's seen a rubber tree,
or the way that it drips, and there's a particular cup that they will collect the rubber in. So, yeah, originally, because I make a lot of towers, so I was thinking of making some sort of tower piece, but then I got this porcelain clay, and I just, very simply, I'm not a ceramicist, but I use anything at hand, really, and I just started making some pots, pinch pots, and let them become something. I just let them be in my hand, and they formulated. I was sort of thinking of the flowers there, and they became quite physical, you know, in their appearance, I suppose. People have said all sorts of things about these pieces on the wall, and yeah, and I suppose I just started playing with them on the floor, and I'd already taken, it's just one photo of his hands with the flowers, and I sort of was trying to blow it up into sections, and I'd got these sections, and then I started playing with the sections of lying them all down, and then I just wanted to have the physicality of these cuts, which are my charcoal drawings that I've drawn on the walls, and actually the actual physicality. My favourite thing about this whole piece was actually doing the drawing and the feeling of that line and those cuts, I suppose. So yeah, so that's really this piece, and I just felt like it was quite fitting for this exhibition, and I don't have much more to say about it right now.
A magnificent piece. And does anybody have any question about it? Are these the actual potato flowers, these little porcelain? And what is porcelain clay at all? Like, we wondered why the texture of some of these are different. Like, some of these seem to be shiny and
some of them
smooth.
are glazed. So some of them I put a glaze inside.
Yes.
And, sort of, and others I just decided not to. I wanted a bit of shiny and a bit of not. So I combined. But I've never used porcelain before, and it's a strange sort of bubblegummy, but you can get really, really thin with it. But I did it in a sort of quite a basic manner, and I quite like that. I like the whiteness of it. I wanted it sort of really sort of like the flower, I suppose. And I went for quite some. I really like colour. So strangely, this is very lacking colour, this piece of artwork. But I kept it very simple, I suppose. Yeah, and I wanted it to feel also the beauty, I think, of this man at this age, and his dignity, I think.
What's his name?
Jack.
Jack. Did Jack come and see this?
Sadly not. He's not really, he's quite forgetful now. He's getting quite sort of but he's still physically out there doing the garden, but I think I generally go around and do things like make pancakes for him, or have cups of tea with him and chat in his garden and talk about his potatoes. Quite simple. I think coming here, I don't know, maybe be a bit much. But I've shown him pictures and etc.
He liked them.
Yeah, no, he does. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we are getting to our last artist, who is Ben van Praag. Is he?
No, absolutely
Yes,
not.
so we will
Absolutely
return back to the other room, and Ben, maybe you can precede us walking through the corridor. So please come back this way. Yeah, thanks, Lucia.
It's more that people stock up on wine and
Yes.
things
Yes.
first.